There seems to be a prevailing tendency in artists that I notice primarily manifests through or is exacerbated by constant engagement with the ever growing abundance of educational art content on the internet. The current online art space's enamorment with studying, technicality, and skill based learning has led many artists to become absorbed in learning to their own detriment. Learning to feel safe, learning to someday become good enough. Why do so many of us become convicted about training, grinding, and boot camping art? Is it to become a professional in the industry? Is it for self gratification? External gratification? I'm sure there are a multitude of questionable motivations that fuel our desire to study a wide array of concepts with such veracity. But one such motivation that drove me towards intensive studying was the hope, or more accurately, the expectation, that doing so would give me the skills needed to someday be good enough to create whatever I'd want with ease and make me better at art in a grand sense. And if I take a deeper look at my motivations, I'm certain that the desire to be perceived as great and validated by others was also a driving factor that I never took the time to address or admit to. As a victim of the aimless art study grindset, I have spent years of my development seeking countless hours into study sessions, operating under the assumption that all of this practicing random topics others said were important with no clear end goal would somehow translate to having the skills to then make the art I want. I never took a step back and wondered why the heck I'm concerned about learning the golden rules of classical composition and why I feel inadequate over my lack of proficiency in areas I never actually planned to use in my art. I spent lots of time doing things I found so boring because I thought I was lacking in those areas and I should know them, as if knowing them gives me some sort of badge of approval and permission to make something of my own. In fact, I feel like having gone through a period where I only did preparatory art studying sort of fried my brain to the point where I didn't even know what art I wanted to create anymore. For years, I would rely on copying photos as a substitute to working on my own things because I felt like it was a safer, more predictable route to a finished piece. And because of this, I would even joke with others that despite being an artist, I'm ironically very uncreative, something I genuinely felt to be true. I know I'm not the only one that has gone through this or is currently going through this in their art journey. Among the thousands of artists convinced that it is necessary to deeply pursue the study of anatomy, for example, many of them feel it's through the mastery of this vast subject that they will gain the skills necessary to achieve their artistic goals. But those who have fallen too deep into this pursuit have forgotten what their goals even were in the first place. Do you see how this can easily become a point of contingency that leads to feelings of inadequacy, frustration, doubt, and eventually burnout? When we spend so much of our time learning what others tell us we should know, we lose sight of what we need to know for ourselves. Let's not forget that making art for yourself is one of the most personal and individualistic activities on the planet. It's easy to fall into the art study trap, especially if you're undertaking these endeavors without proper guidance. And not many artists have mentors or teachers that are actually invested in them as individuals and have their best interests in mind. I mean, it makes perfect sense to think it's imperative to understand perspective, composition, anatomy, color theory, and so forth, even if you don't end up using these things in your art, because everyone around you is saying they're important to know. And from my point of view, a lot of artists have been led to form the impression that these concepts encompass a far larger array of applications than they actually do. But if you're going to spend time learning these things, you should find what's important for you to know as you're interested in it, as it relates to what you dream to make, and as you find your lack of proficiency in an area holds you back from expressing what you intend to express and how you intend to express it. I should say, though, that having a period of your development that is characterized by exploratory studying isn't inherently bad, and There are likely some things you wouldn't even know that you loved drawing or wanted to incorporate into your art if you didn't take the time to focus on them closely, which is what studying allows you to do. It's just that we need to remember to exercise our creativity regularly. For far too long, I believed the eventual payoff for aimless studying would be creativity and originality, but I had to learn that it doesn't work like that. Creativity is a skill, and skills are built by habits. Studying art fundamentals can easily turn into a habit that many people become too entrenched in, and inversely, not doing the things you wanted to do in the first place on a regular basis is also a habit that you've carefully reinforced through repetition. So when should you incorporate studying into your practice? I would say that generally, you should study when you notice gaps in your understanding of particular areas that show up as you spend time doing your personal work. In this case, these gaps you want to fill should be things you're able to put into words in order to ensure that you're studying them with the intent to apply them directly to your personal work. You can also take the time to study when you're feeling curious about a particular subject. This is always fun, and I don't want to discourage exploration. It's just crucial to not allow ourselves to believe that this is making us good at something it's not. You'll only get good at the things you spend time doing directly. The whole point is, don't start doing a bunch of studying of various art fundamentals in an abstract sense just because several people said that you need to know these things. Study the things that you know will actually contribute towards allowing you to achieve your artistic goals, and be aware of and accepting of the fact that studying anything else that doesn't fit this criteria won't have some strange crossover improvement effect in other areas, at least not in any way noticeable. Something I've observed for a while nowadays is that many artists in the earlier stages of their development are too self-aware about what there is to know, or what could be learned, or what people say should be learned about art. And because of this, they begin to form these constructs about what making and learning art is all about before they've even really had the chance to develop their own practice and their relationship with art. There's essentially too much self-awareness in artists before they've even developed the mileage and experience necessary to sufficiently grapple with the concepts they've become self-aware of. Concepts that I believe they shouldn't even be concerned about until they encounter them naturally, or as they become relevant in their work and they decide to then pursue the study of them. But unfortunately, before a lot of us even get a chance to have this self-discovery in our art and form our own opinions about art, thanks to the internet, we're overexposed to any and every artist's practice, process, teachings, ideologies, etc. It seems that before all of this, people engaged with their own art a lot more deeply in the earliest and most crucial stages than is the case nowadays. And as someone who has spent the majority of my formative art-making years completely oblivious to much of the things people say about learning art, I know what it's like to draw with youthful innocence. And ever since discovering that you can actually do things to improve at art, and subsequently being sucked into the studying whirlpool, I've been trying to return to that feeling. This entire video hinges on this. Don't forget the joy. Art should be fun. You know, I'm not one to try to make definitive statements about the nature of art, as I don't think anyone can, but the farthest I will go towards making such a claim about art is that you should always be enjoying it. If you choose to spend your time invested in studying what you know will lead to your goals, then enjoy it. But if you feel dissonance between what you're practicing and what you actually want to do, recognize that the situation isn't conducive to joy and steer the ship towards where it should be instead. If you choose to study things you will never use in your art, enjoy that too. If studying towards no end goal is genuinely enjoyable to you, then that is something to continue. Just watch out for moments where you may be forcing yourself to study something that you aren't actually enjoying learning about because you feel like you should know it, or you're unsure as to whether or not you even want to utilize this knowledge in your art. Be observant of the nature of your inclinations and exalt the role of joy in creation. There may not always be joy moment to moment, such as while problem solving a difficult area in a drawing, for example. But as a whole, you should feel that each session spent drawing was time well spent. If the joy doesn't come naturally, you need to evaluate why and make it your priority to savor and take solace in your craft. Thanks for listening.